Now, you remember when 9/11 happened and how tragic it was for all of us and how we were just beside ourselves. How could this be? Why do they rage? Why do they hate us so? And then we saw the pictures of people, some people, celebrating around the world, right? Why? So you tell me, why were they celebrating that day?
The end of America.
Felt like the end of America. Why were they celebrating? Say it again.
They thought they'd done something good for God.
They thought they'd done something good for God. You ever sometimes root for something even though you know you probably shouldn't? You know, it's not like this, but it's just like we root for something and then we kind of wonder, why are we rooting for this? But I think for a lot of Muslims, again, not for all, it was just condemned widely around the world, but for some Muslims, it felt like, no, it wasn't about the death of innocent people. It was about finally somebody stuck a fist in America's face. Somebody finally, when you're humiliated, when you feel like you have no power, finally somebody stuck a fist in America's face. So radical Muslims argue that collateral damage of civilians, there you go, Rick, is acceptable if the overall intent was to achieve a military victory for the sake of God. You make excuses. You justify your actions because this is a sacrifice for God. All operations are carefully chosen. The two goals are to weaken the enemy and win converts. In communicating with the Muslim world, verses from the Quran and the Hadith are regularly used to justify the attacks. Recruits are chosen from among marginal Muslims, recent converts, or those who have felt the humiliations of the modern world very strongly. Did you read the article from, based on Kutub that was here in Greeley, Colorado? Yeah, and you could just feel some of the humiliation that he felt and some of the disjointedness he felt from the Western culture, even back in the 50s. What would he feel like today? This latter group often includes the well-educated, especially those who have come from a Muslim society to a Western country for the purposes of education or employment. Often these people feel more keenly the dramatic disparity between their society and Western societies and have a desire to do something about it. You know, if you want to read an interesting book that gets you in the head of this, and again, this is fiction, but John Updike wrote a book called The Terrorist. It's not on the list in the back, but it's called The Terrorist. It's a short little book, but it's about a young Muslim in this country who eventually gets recruited to do a suicide bombing. And it's very provocative. Good book. I recommend it because it gets into the head of people and into the hearts of people and what they're thinking.
A lot of times these ones you hear about have been educated in the United States.
Absolutely. Educated in the United States or Western Europe. And maybe they feel the disjuncture more than somebody else that's living in outstate Libya that really doesn't know that much about the Western world. In the end, the globalist radical Muslim vision of jihad is world domination. Islam must come to dominate the world in its entirety. Again, this is a theory from Cook. In accordance with a radical Muslim interpretation of Quran, and fight them so that sedition, temptation might end, and the only religion will be that of Allah. Clearly, this absolute vision does not speak for all Muslims, but it does have resonance for some. Okay? So far, so good? Or so far, so disturbing? One more book, and then we'll do some talking, okay? Beyond Fundamentalism, the book that I mentioned earlier. And again, when was that written? Could you look that up real quick, Annette? It's in a second edition. 2009. So we've moved along. Our thinking has developed and become more specialized when it comes to understanding who we're really fighting against these days. Reza Aslan argues for a careful differentiation between radical jihadists and more politically minded Islamists. It's really easy to lump them together, isn't it? Should we be afraid of the Muslim Brotherhood or not? Should we? What do you think? Hold on. Okay. And that's a good question. That's a good kind of wait and see thing. Radical jihadists like Osama bin Laden are engaged, this is very interesting, I think, in a cosmic struggle between good and evil. This is more than a holy war with earthly battles between rival religious groups. A cosmic war is like a ritual drama in which participants act out on earth a battle they believe is actually taking place in the heavens. The conflict may be real, but war itself is being waged on a spiritual plane. We humans are merely this is my typewriter going bad, are merely actors in a divine script written by God. You know, some of that it happens in the book of Revelation. You know, there's a battle that's going on earth, but part of the message of that apocalyptic book is that the same battle is being waged in heaven, and God's going to win. And that gives humans on earth, that gives the faithful Christians on earth a sense of peace and trust that God will be with them, and in the end they will win. So we've got some of the same kind of apocalyptic scenario, even in the Bible itself, in the book of Revelation. A cosmic war transforms those who would be considered butchers and thugs into soldiers sanctioned by God. Isn't that just so telling? It is enough to align one's will with the will of God, to strike at the enemy with the full force of God's wrath, confident that the end result rests not in the hands of human beings, but God. You know, God is on our side. I don't think they doubt it for a minute. They justify everything by starting with that. A cosmic war partitions the world into black and white, good and evil, us and them. In such a war, there is no middle ground. Everyone must choose a side. The enemy is neither an army nor a state, but evil itself. The battle is over civilization. Our identity is at risk. We cannot negotiate. We cannot surrender. We cannot lose. Which I think really gives us a mindset, doesn't it? A mindset that makes this seem like it's more than about land. It's more than about a nation. It's about everything. And it's about the very civilization that we live with and the life we have with God in that world. Radical jihadists attack the United States not to advance a particular cause or to redress a specific wrong, but simply to make a point. To demonstrate that despite all appearances to the contrary, they possess a power infinitely superior to their adversaries. Their goal is nothing less than global transformation. There's that thing again. But then look at this qualification of this. But how such transformation will take shape, who will lead the new order, and what that order will ultimately look like are questions that need not be addressed until after this world has been swept away. Let's just wreck it all. And then God will figure it out. Doesn't that kind of sound like what's happening? I mean, yeah, just wreck it all. Just wreck it all. Hit us most specifically where it's going to hurt us the most. You know, in the economy, the Twin Towers kind of stuff. Just hit us where it's going to hurt the most, but just wreck it all, because they know they can't necessarily take over the United States, right? Just wreck it all. Just wreck it all, because this is a cosmic battle, and they are fighting Allah's war on earth in the same way that Allah is fighting it in heaven. Their goal is nothing, and I read that before. Islamism, and I think this is an interesting differentiation. Islamism, on the other hand, is a fusing of religion and nationalism. It is a political philosophy that seeks to establish an Islamic state, either through grassroots social and political activism or through violent revolution. Okay, more grassroots stuff in Egypt, more violent stuff in Libya, right? Built upon a distinctly Islamic moral framework. Some of the more well-known Islamic groups include the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, the Taliban in Afghanistan, Hamas in Palestine, and Hezbollah in Lebanon. Islamism and jihadism, once cousins, have split into two opposing rival movements. Islamism remains a nationalist ideology, whereas most jihadists would like to erase all borders, eradicate all nationalities, and to return to an idealized past of religious communalism. According to Reza Aslan, Islamists may provide, and this is, I thought, the most provocative thing that he said. You can agree or disagree, I'm not sure what to think, but I'm thinking about it. Islamists may provide an important bridge between secular nationalism, like Hosni Mubarak, these propped-up dictators, right, and radical jihadism. Poll after poll in the Middle East indicates that the lack of political rights is the people's biggest concern. It certainly seems to be the last couple of months, doesn't it? Moreover, when given the choice between more moderate and radical Islamic positions, people have consistently sided with the moderates. Islamism, according to Aslan, may be the antidote to jihadism. And finally, Aslan argues that there is only one way to win a cosmic war, refuse to fight it. All right, interesting, provocative. All right, that all makes sense, right? I feel like after reading stuff over the last 5, 6, 7 years, though, I feel like I understand a lot better than I did before. I mean, we're trying to understand people that are largely irrational, right? And then next to jihadists, you have Islamists. So, okay, if we're going to be really afraid of jihadists and fight them at every turn, what should we do with the Islamists? What should we do with the Muslim Brotherhood? You know, they say that they want to move in, be a part of that governance structure. It can be a secular state. At least that's what I've heard. But did they really mean that? How strong will be the push for Sharia law? And if it is a strong push, should we get behind that or not? Hard to know, isn't it? Is that a bad thing or not?
Is that what they feel is going to take over Egypt after the Brotherhood?
I don't think anybody knows. That's the problem. That's the problem, because when you have no structure, really very little structure, because you've had these corrupt and propped up dictators, and now they've let go almost all the political structure, and now suddenly there's a vacuum. Well, who's going to rush to fill it? And how healthy is that going to be? And then, I'd hate to be president, I can tell you that, of the United States. Because what can we do? I don't know.